and welcome to our next episode of Talk the Hind Leg Off Horse. I'm Casey McKenna, this is Georgie Welge, and today we are joined with Harry Corkett, who is a groundwork trainer and dressage rider. So we're going to pick his brains about everything to do with groundwork, how that relates to riding, and hopefully give you some good tips and tricks and things that you can learn to take away and play around with your own horses. So, where do we begin?
Well, I was just saying to Harry, I want to know what made you go down this route with this avenue.
So I started off in Herefordshire, kind of learning a little bit with young horses and young stock, and generally just trying to get my riding acumen up a little bit. And when I was 16, I applied to go and work for somebody over in the Netherlands, and I kind of stumbled across it actually. So it wasn't something I went looking for, but it was something that I grew an interest in, and I started to see the value of it. We worked with a variety of horses over there, from top dressage horses to really naughty horses, and I saw how it worked for kind of any horse across the board. And then when I came back over here, I decided to work with my one, who was 5 at the time, and I just played around with it by myself and kind of put that knowledge into him. And I saw a massive change in his demeanour and his rideability, which for me was important, to be able to get him to a stage where I could get him out competing happily and safely, as that was my goal. And that's kind of where I started off with all this stuff, yeah.
Because was it him, your 5-year-old, was that the one you just mentioned that he bucked you off?
Yeah, he had me off in the car park at Bury Farm at a local show in a novice. And he was just a little bit more horse than I'd ever had before. I was quite young at the time, and he was a bit more horse than my mum was used to working with, who was helping me, handling him and taking me to shows at the time. So I felt like it came at the right time for me to learn these other skills that weren't massively accessible in this country. No. That was maybe a bit unconventional and a little bit against the grain from what your standard dressage trainer did.
Absolutely.
That's not to say there's anything wrong with that type of training, but it was something extra that I could add in, that I've then started working on a variety of different horses afterwards, and kind of building up my base of being able to work with all different types in hand.
I think it's really, you made on a really interesting point, is that some of that information hasn't been very easily accessible for us in the UK.
Yeah.
Do you see that changing? Are you getting more people contacting you, going, help me?
Yeah, massively, and I think there's always been a big market for it, I think, in people that maybe don't do it as a profession. I think people are more open to ideas. I think in the professional world, we do things how we do things, and maybe different ideas get left behind a little bit. But I'm seeing more and more people coming to me that are professionals that want a little bit more help or a little bit of direction that maybe is different to how they've done it before. Maybe they got a horse that the conventional way hasn't quite worked with, and we're finding, let's give this a go and just see what happens. And we're starting to get more of those, and then that trickles down, I think, to their clients. And I think generally the state of dressage in particular at the moment is changing towards a much more natural, harmonious way of doing things than maybe it has been for the last 15 years. So it is definitely a place where people are starting to come to try and learn new ideas, for sure.
So it definitely seems as though people's mindset is slightly changing about how they approach training horses.
Yeah, definitely. And
sometimes by necessity at the my right, with some of the social license stuff going on, and so they're starting to think, okay, I need to start being able to make different connections with my animal.
For sure.
And that's where this is then growing, which can't be a bad thing, right?
No, I think it can only be good. And when you want to get results in sport, you have to be very disciplined, very dedicated, and we kind of expect the horses to come along that journey with us. I think there are always...
Sometimes they don't want to come.
Sometimes they don't want to do it. And some days we don't want to do it. Some days we don't come into it with the right attitude. So I think what the groundworking does is it gives us a framework for anybody and everybody to follow. When you're not quite sure how to fix a problem, go back to the patterns, go back to the process. When the horse throws something new at you, young horses do it daily sometimes. Actually, if we stick to a routine and a process, we can always come back to that point of relaxation to kind of guide the horse through life a little bit. In this exercise, we are looking at teaching him to measure the distance. So I want him to learn with the pressure release to stay back out of my space a little bit. So when he creeps in, I make the pressure with the rope, make a voice aid. When he's out my space, I relax the posture down and he follows. This is the first exercise that we do, just to establish that connection that the horse should listen to us because we have something worth listening to. Good.
Training any horse in any way, whichever route you choose to follow, which obviously there are many, that in the end consistency is key. So you know, the more consistent you are with what you do and how you do it, the better result you're going to get at the end of it.
For sure. So, it's kind of having that process to fall back on when you don't quite know how to fix a problem. A lot of the clients that I work with, that's kind of the key point, is you get really stuck. For example, the turn on the forehand, whether you do that ridden or in hand, is a great way to bring the horse's energy back down. For the horse to do that exercise properly, they have to cross the hind leg under the body, yield through the rib cage and soften the posture. So that's something you can always come back to. You're leading the horse in, he's being naughty, you can't get him on the lorry, you can always go back to that kind of that one pattern, for example, just to get the horse back on side, get the horse soft, get the horse supple again, refocus back on the task at hand.
And I think that's a really good point, isn't it? That, I mean, I have a little bit of a history of some natural horsemanship and spent some time in the States, blah, 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 with cowboys mostly, but it's exactly that, isn't it? If you are approaching a new task, for example, with a horse, but it starts getting emotional because it's struggling with it, or you get emotional because you're kind of a little bit flabbergasted of what you've got to do,
or you're scared,
because you know there's a lot of people that are more nervous than they may admit around their own horses. Having that kind of almost a script, like you say, the patterns of going back to gain that calmness, gain that relaxation, so then you can maybe reapproach the issue or whatever it is you're trying to teach at that time, and it breaks it down in a way that the humans find it easier to understand.
For sure. I think a lot of the training is about teaching the people how to read cues from their horses. And what are we looking for, when is it right, when do you put the pressure on, when do you take the pressure off, and I think a lot of that is kind of guiding people through that process, and then the horses will respond in the right way.
But I think that's something that I think this is a point that we've reiterated a bit throughout the previous episodes, and we'll probably continue to do, is that horsemanship as a rule has been a bit lost, I think, with people being in a position where they can just go and buy a horse. They buy a horse, they don't realise there is a lot more to owning a horse than just buying it. And you know, I mean, from, you know, I haven't come through any kind of, you know, if you like, formal training of groundwork and things, but what I've learnt over many years, you know, from a young age, backing young horses and dealing with young horses, you learn those cues. It's not done in a way that is maybe structured. So like the system that you've learned, the system that Georgie's learned there, it's a structured way of learning that. But in the end, even just handling young horses, knowing when's the right time to, you know, the horse will accept you putting a saddle on, when it'll accept you to, you know, lay on it, sit on it, whatever it is, all of that comes down to you being able to understand and sense from your horse whether it's going to accept that or whether that's not the right time, which is a frustrating thing I find, and I've certainly found over the years, having backed many horses, is people not understanding when is the right time to do something. So when's the right time to put some pressure on a horse, when's the right time not to put pressure on a horse, when a horse just needs a bit more time, when it is just being a little bit difficult. You know, I mean, the horses I've had over the years that have come in where somebody's, you know, tried to back it and they haven't acknowledged what that horse was telling them. They've climbed on board, the horse has gone, holy Jesus, buck them off. Probably scared itself half to death.
For sure.
And then I've ended up with the aftermath. And then I've then got another problem, because obviously that horse, then its association with a rider getting on top of it is, well, the last time that happened, it scared the life out of me because they fell off. So, you know, so I think, you know, like with all of these things, I think it's people understanding that everything that you do with your horse, whether it be, you know, on the ground, any handling you do is all groundwork training. It's all teaching your horse to do the right things and react in the right ways. So like you say, you're sort of being more specialist on that, but I think teaching horses just to, you know, acknowledge what's going on around them for a start, but then not panic about it and not overreact to it. But in the end, you are dealing with an animal where they are a flight animal, so their instinct is often, and like I'm sure you know, all of us know, some horses' instinct is to just run, and their flight instinct is very strong,
just get away,
and others, they're not like that, you know. Others are too bold, and they're not scared of anything, and they, you know, but I think people find that hard to read. So I think, you know, I think a lot of this sort of groundwork training does have it's a useful thing for those who don't necessarily understand, you know, when a horse is telling them it's nervous, or when it's a bit, you know, scared of something, a bit unsure of something, or not understanding something.
For sure.
You know, so I think it's useful, but I think people do need to remember it kind of covers handling horses in any respect.
Oh, for sure.
And
I think that comes on to a little bit of the point of when I go and work with professionals that handle however many horses, you know, where I used to work, we did upwards of 30 foals a year. We had young stock, we had young stallions to get ready for licensing, and daily you're handling countless horses, and you're having to make those reads kind of off of a feeling quite quickly, or potentially you're in danger. You kind of pick that natural read up when you do it all the time. And when I go to a lovely lady down the road that's got one horse, she's having to learn just for that one horse, and maybe hasn't got numerous ways of figuring out the cues. So something like this gives her a little bit more of a, okay, if I follow this, I can get to that.
Yeah.
I think, like you say, the horsemanship side of it's gone a little bit because people aren't working with project horses. They aren't working with difficult little ponies. People want to buy something that's safe and already made for them a little bit. So they're not having to maybe learn that so much anymore.
And I think, like, we've had the conversation in the past that, I mean, I've got so much going through my brain right now because talking to you is fascinating, Harry, but we've had the conversation in the past at the moment is that we don't have any working horses now, unless they're competitive horses, dressage, eventing, blah, blah, blah. We don't have farm animals anymore, whereas places like America, you know, they are still a working animal. They still work on the ranches, and so therefore that horsemanship is kind of still ingrained in most of their culture.
For sure.
Because they are working with the animals, and therefore they have to pick it up, otherwise mistakes can be very costly. But whereas we don't seem, like you say, we've got this culture in the UK specifically that is very much the case. You know, I mean, I get told all the time, oh, I just want a horse that's been there, done it, and I want this, and I want it sound, and I want it happy, and I want it easy to handle for my 10-year-old child. And it's like, well, how's that going to happen? Even the most well-behaved horse in a bad environment, or with a handler that doesn't understand, that horse will revert quite quickly
to nature.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think people do need to bear in mind with all of this, you know, handling horses is dangerous. You know, it can be dangerous. You know, so
more so dangerous, arguably, if you're not noticing the communication the horse is giving you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I think that's where there are people that do come unstuck because they, you know, they don't realise that actually their horse is terrified of something. It's literally about to plough straight over the top of them, and they're blissfully unaware of that until said horse ploughs over the top of them and they're laid in a crumpled heap. The horse will get the blame for being, you know, naughty or whatever, but is it all the horse's fault? You know, because if that person isn't experienced enough to understand that the horse was about to do that, they weren't in the right place at the right time. You know, so it's kind of, they need to take responsibility for that, don't they?
For sure.
So
well, I think you touched on, you know, it's teaching humans the cues, right? It's teaching humans those patterns and then teaching them of the body language and the tone of the eye, or where the ear is, or how the neck is being held. All of those things give them the cues to indicate, and they start taking more notice of the actual body language of the horse, right?
For sure.
That is their method of communication with us.
Exactly that. Horses can't talk. We have to watch. And I think once people start noticing those slight changes in body language, in posture, I think people start to build a better connection with their horse. And when you have a better connection with the horse, you look after each other. It's very, very rare do I go and work with something that's been branded as particularly naughty or dangerous, that the horse is actually naughty or dangerous. The horse expresses difficult behaviours because of potentially past trauma or a bad experience, whatever it might be. But actually, if you can reframe it for the horse and show the horse where to be and show the horse how to be comfortable by themselves, that you're there to show them and guide them, but you're not going to tell them, but you're also going to support them. That's essentially what I'm looking at when I do the groundwork, is offering the horse a better solution to the problem.
So would you say it's, you know, it's that cliche to being your partner effectively, is starting to think about working together rather than having to constantly battle against one another?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the horses are herd animals, right? So they'd usually be in a herd. They'd have the stallion as the leader of the herd, and they'd have the lead mare, which would dictate some things as well. And so the horses are wired to respond to pressure release, but it's never a dictatorship. So you're never going to force a horse successfully to do something forever. It's not a conducive way of making something happen. So we want to show the horse that actually we are, what would you say, we are not in control, but we are worth listening to, and you should follow me because it's safe and I'll show you the right way, and then the horse will follow you. That's kind of the process we want to try and set up with the horse.
And as you go working with clients, because you do this a lot, you go and help people with their, you know, anything they perceive as a problem, which is actually probably just more a miscommunication with them and their horse. Do you notice that horses start going, you know, I mean, I've been and helped some people with some horses, and sometimes you get to the horse and they go, finally somebody's listening to me, because they feel like they can then communicate more freely. They start actually communicating slightly more with their language and want to work with you more.
Yeah, for sure. But kind of on that point, I think everybody that has horses that I work with anyway wants the best for their horse. They maybe just don't know how to ask the right questions.
Need the methodology, right?
Yeah, and people just get it a little bit wrong, but that's not through them choosing to get it wrong. And so my job is to try and go out there and say to people, actually, have you thought about this? This might be the reason why. Let's work through this a little bit in my way for a minute and see if it works.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, that in the end there is a lot of ignorance in the horse world. So there is a lot of people just don't understand things, and they don't get, you know, and it's understanding, you know, how a horse thinks about things, you know, I mean, and I know, and, you know, it is all through learning, and I know now I very much approach certain issues and problems in a different way to how I would have done when I was a teenager, you know, when that was all I knew. So because that was all I knew, that's what I did. There's nothing wrong with that, but as you start to learn other ways and different ways to do things, you know, I mean, even now, I mean, I nowadays, for example, if I'm training people cross country and we have a ditch to jump and the horses haven't jumped ditches before, they're a bit nervous at ditches, the first thing I do, I never say to the rider, right, we'll just take them up to the ditch. I just get them to walk them around and around and around the ditch. So the horse is not, it knows there's a hole in the ground, it's not scared by the hole in the ground. The riders tend to then be a little bit calmer about it, because most riders, you say jump a ditch and they go, whoa, you know, and that doesn't help. But by just getting them to just wander around and up and down and next to it, then most of the time when you then trot the horse to the ditch, they go, oh, a bit nervous, but okay, I'll jump over it.
Sure.
You know, so they kind of understand. If I just said, right, go to that ditch, and if it stops, you've just got to keep kicking and kicking and kicking.
Just pressure.
Then of course the horse then is like, whoa, and then they tend to just go the other way, you know, and then the riders get more nervous, and then because the riders get more nervous because they don't know what's going to happen, then it's that snowball effect, which I think happens a lot with the horses in general, you know, riders and what they the signals they give to their horses.
Yeah.
When they feel their horses get nervous, they get nervous.
Yeah.
And
something I kind of tell everybody I work with is, if you ask the right question, the horse will give you the right answer. So if you set everything up, whether I'm trying to get the horse to relax to the bag pressure in hand, or I'm trying to teach the horse a flying change for the dressage test, if you set everything up correctly, you have everything where it needs to be, and then you ask a question, the horse can only give you the right answer, and they find confidence in that. So you have to make the environment where it needs to be so that the horse can do what you want the horse to do. Absolutely. Rather than being like, right, come on, you are going to do this thing, and they go, well, actually I don't really know what we're trying to achieve here, and then you find the uncertainty is what then makes the horses more tense.
Well, and I think that's a good point. I mean, and actually, I've just been away teaching camp for a few days, and there were some quite nervous riders, and there were some horses that were a bit lit up because they were away from home, they're in a new environment, there's lots going on. The one thing I say to people, horses as a rule, they like to have a leader. They like to be given direction. You have like you say, in a herd, you have the ones that are leading the herd and the ones that are following along. So most horses like to be given some form of direction as to what they should be doing, where and when. And I always say to people, when they're with their horse in an environment where the horse is a bit lit up, give the horse direction. Don't just sit there waiting to see what might happen, because it's almost, most riders instinctively will just sort of sit and hold on and wait to see what the horse is going to do. Well, most horses put in a position where they're a bit nervous and you just leave them to it, they will get a bit panicky. The more you interact with the horse and the more you just do things,
ask some questions, get it listening, they tend to relax and listen and start to concentrate on you rather than everything else, and then you can actually work the horse.
Well, that might be a good point as well, because that's a slightly problem with the species, right? The species differences. Humans is high factor of fear is catatonic behaviour, where we tend to switch off, the brain stops moving or working, and therefore the hands stop moving and everything sets a little bit. Whereas horses, when they start getting to that moment, start thinking, I need to get the hell out of here, So there's that mismatch on a species-specific issue with the training, isn't there? Do you feel that part of the success with some of these modalities, natural horsemanship, groundwork, everything like that, is because, as Casey just so rightly said, that he's gained that experience over a 30-year, 40-year, 30, 25.
I'm not that bloody
10 year.
25, 30-year-old, years of experience. All that time, you've had to learn through mistakes. You've got, darn, that didn't work. Whereas some of these formats give almost a blueprint to how to avoid that, so we can get that knowledge into horse owners and riders at a much quicker level. So they can, and again, it's just being more observant and connecting with your horse.
I mean, I've worked with horses in ways that I wouldn't necessarily follow now. The kind of more traditional ways of doing things, and there is definitely still a theme of that runs through, that you need in dressage. You need a level of classical training in dressage to be able to ride dressage properly for the tests at the show. That's what the judges want to see. But kind of the training methods to get there, I'm much more likely now to follow the kind of mindset from the groundwork with the pressure release. If you're not asking, if you don't want anything to change, why have you got an aid on? Like, just being really disciplined when I ride. If I don't want anything different, why am I asking for something? And letting the horse make the mistake, whether it's in hand or ridden, and then make a correction. Because so much of the time we spend chasing horses, saving them, micromanage them, Typical lunging. Chase the horse on the lunge so the horse keeps going. The horse never learns to go for themselves. So it's about training reactions in hand and ridden, and then leaving the horse alone. Make the mistake, it's no problem. Then they learn that we don't get flustered when we have a problem, when we do something we didn't want, and then we put them back. This is where I wanted you, leave them alone again. And that comes from the groundwork. So, when we do it, and you must find it the same when you do any kind of handling of the horses ready to back them. It's a system. You do all the stuff in hand ready to back them, whether it's following kind of a process or not. you go, okay, so we do X, Y, and Z to prepare the horse to be ridden, so the horse finds comfort in knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know? And here we can also start to look at the body language and getting him to mirror a little bit. Good boy. There. Good. Good boy. And then we adapt this slightly, and we do it by not turning around, so we give him less of a body cue, and we want the same reaction. So now he's got to follow me even more, and that's essentially what this exercise is, getting the horse to follow your lead and getting the horse to follow your body language. Make the correction, back out the space, bring the energy down. There, and then we get a nice bit of licking and chewing relaxation point through the horse's posture. And then stop. Really good. And then this time I'm just going to see how much he's following. I'm going to ask him to speed up. And then I'm going to ask him to slow down. And then speed up again. And then slow down again. And you see that he starts to follow me properly now. Good boy. There. Then he finds that relaxation through the work a little bit.
Yeah, well, they like to know what's coming.
Yeah.
You know, they don't like surprises. Horses don't like surprises. But yeah, and absolutely, you know, I mean, I have my way of backing a horse, which, you know, and as I've said to people before, sometimes it might take me longer to actually get on them. But once I'm on them,
it's quick.
They'll be off and running. Well, not literally, but you know, they'll be quite quick into, you know, hacking out, and then going in an arena and trotting and cantering round, and they won't be you know, they won't be, you know, scared and worried, and it's not going to be a drama. You know, I mean, it frustrates me when I see you see a lot of clips all the time of people, you know, getting on youngsters for the first time, and the horse's first reaction is to set off bronking. And I kind of think, well,
what are you
right
teaching?
Time to get on. You know, that wasn't the right thing to do. You know, so understanding that actually, you know, there is the right time for doing things, and you know, there's been plenty of times I've thought a horse might be ready the following day for me to get on it, and then I think I go do my usual process before I go to get on and think, today's not the day. You know, tomorrow will be different. I think the other thing is to not ever feel under pressure to move to the next step, if you like, if it's not the right time. You know, if the horse isn't ready or if you aren't ready, you know, you don't have to push to the next step just because. You can give yourself another day or another 2 days or another week or another whatever it is you need to do, and then move on, and then you'll find actually you move on a lot quicker than trying to sort of do something and then having to backpedal and go, oh well, we've done that, but oh no, now we need to come back to do this because that hasn't worked, and you know, it just ends up being completely chaotic.
You touched on a really good point just now as you were talking about how, you know, the classical dressage training, and so we were discussing on the way up here actually about, you know, how do you feel your knowledge, and you probably did answer this already, but fits into the kind of traditional scales of training in the dressage world?
What do you mean?
So the classical scales.
Right, so scales of training. Do you know your scales of training?
Yeah, not in order.
Oh, God. I told you. What did I tell you? But I told you that
rhythm, suppleness, contact, impulsion, then
straightness,
then collection. Yeah.
Do you agree with that order with what you work with on the ground, or, you know?
Yeah, kind of. I would say most of the horses that I work with are bred to have some level of athleticism, so they come out with good natural rhythm and impulsion off the bat, so that's not really something I really have to think about. Like, I've got this 4-year-old in here behind us who's a really nice German Hanoverian bred horse, just naturally has a good rhythm and naturally is quite forward. So the first thing I think about on him, because I'm not having to ride that, would probably be just getting the contact. So I think it depends what you're working with, to be honest. If you've got something that goes forward and slow, the rhythm is important. So I think they are important, but not necessarily in that order at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think collection's definitely the last thing we work on. Definitely can't do that before the others, but straightness comes after impulsion, I would say, but the other ones I feel maybe cross over a little bit depending on what you're working with.
Yeah, well, I think it does, but then equally, you know, just looking at it from a slightly different perspective, although we say collection is the last one, everyone should remember that even when every time you ask your horse to go from trot to walk, it is a form of collection in its most basic sense. So even a 3-year-old just broken in, you know, you go trot, you come to walk, that horse has collected. So I think the scales of training is something that it's a frustrating thing really, because I think they're very useful, and that's what we are being judged on as dressage riders. That is what, well, should be being judged on. That's what a judge should be looking at. But actually then relating that into training and how you then go about, you know, putting it into practice is a whole nother ball game. Because it does come out of order, and it does, different things change.
Dressage is just such an arbitrary thing, right? And I think really logically about everything in life. I'm a very logical person. I've had to kind of develop my feel over time with different trainers and different visualizations and things. And the way I try and coach it, the way I try and think about it, is about stripping it down to make it really simple. And I think if I can understand it simply, the horse can understand it, because how do you teach somebody how to feel when the balance is right? What does that mean? What does over the back mean? There are all of these terms that are like judge jargon that actually, what's the nuts and bolts of what that means when you're training your horse at home by yourself? What are we actually aiming for here? And it's a feel, and so I've gone through different things in my riding career of trying to understand what those mean, and essentially I've come to the point now where I go, if I train the right reactions off my leg, off my seat, off my rein, and I teach the horse how to be in balance, I'm never going to be far wrong from a riding point of view.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah,
that's a fair statement.
The next exercise is essentially just to turn on the forehand in hand. So I want to establish that he waits for me there. Good, I scratch him. Good, and then I make a tiny little bit of flexion. I keep the rope neck length, hand up to the wither, and I'm just going to press where my leg would go, and I want to see that crossing under the body and the softening of his neck around me slightly. Now this horse ridden is a little bit stiffer to the left side, and so we can work a bit here and feel through the rib cage and achieve that yielding there. Good. And then we back him up, we reinforce that first exercise. Come to this side, just make him wait a little bit. He thinks too quickly, this horse. He's a very busy boy. Good. And then we bring him in again. And it's that nice relaxed step under the body, feeling the ribcage move away from my hand, catching the energy there, and then letting that neck drop around me a little bit. So this exercise is really working for the suppleness. Good boy. When we back him up a bit. Good.
Dressage as a sport is quite, people love to make it really technical and complicated, because everybody loves to throw in all of these terms that half the time people don't, like you say, they don't even know what they mean.
Inside leg to outside rein.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like half of it is just, a lot of it is just, I think, a way to pad out a lesson for some people, you know, but I think you do need to be kind of clear, and like you say, the more simple you can make something, the easier it is to follow. And in the end, it's repetitive, isn't it? It's this repetitive training, but it's no different to when you're training jumping and what have you. I mean, I think some of the, you know, I mean, obviously you talk to some of the show jumpers and they're maybe a little more literal about things, because they go, there's a jump, I'm pointing you at it and you need to take off. But at the same time, you know, when you get into it more, there's a lot more to it.
A lot more technicality.
But I think you know, and in the end, like you say, if you have a horse that it responds in the right way to all your reactions and essentially, like you say, can work in a good balance, it's teaching it to do lateral work, teaching it to do, you know, shoulder in and half passes and things like that isn't that hard. If the basic way of going is good, you know. So as you say, you know, it's teaching those basic things, which obviously, you know, for you with doing the groundwork, you're teaching
training reactions.
To teach them reactions to things in the right way.
In its most boiled down thing, the groundwork is an opportunity to train reactions out of your horse. So you start off with your starting and stopping exercise. You're training the horse to react to the pressure, to be confident in their own space over there. You progress it, you do a turn on the forehand, control the shoulder, you put the bag on, you teach leg yield, you teach shoulder in, whatever work you want to do, teach the horse park up the block. All it is training a reaction. When I ask this thing, you offer this thing, and the way that we do it in hand is similar to when you teach a new thing on top, is you kind of go, here are your mechanics. If I want this thing, I will use your mechanics to help me get it, and then you'll understand what the aid means, and then I just use the aid. So it's just training reactions in hand, which is the mindset I was saying about for them when you get on top. It's changing the horse's mindset to follow you in hand, to respond to different aids, and then that transfers when you want to ride, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, like we've sort of, I don't know if we've said during this conversation, but we've said a lot of things already. The nice thing about the groundwork stuff, you know, whether it be you're going down a, you know, as you say, like where you've learned more kind of American ways of doing things, it's a slightly different way of doing things.
Told me off earlier. I was talking about backing up a horse, and it was like, what's back?
Yeah, it was like back up. You mean rain back? It was like, that's very American. Back up.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. Yeah, anyway. But I and now you distracted me, so then I've lost the trail of thought. She does this all the time. What was I on about? Try again.
No, American style of things.
Yeah, so the good thing about all of this groundwork stuff is there are plenty of people out there who actually, they don't love riding. You know, they love their horses and they like being around their horses, and they want to teach their horses and give their horses something to do other than just go in a field, but whether they can't ride anymore because they've had an accident, or they're getting to an age they don't want to, or whatever, or whatever the reasons are, they can still teach their horses to do something. They can interact with their horse, they can actually have something to do with them other than all the conventional things, which I think there are a lot of people in the horse world feel under pressure if they own a horse. So is it a dressage horse, is it a show jumper, is it an eventer? Do you do one of these sports? You don't have to use a horse for sport, you can just use a horse for your pleasure, and you can teach it to do things.
Exactly that, and it gives people, like you say, a focus to do with their horse. It doesn't have to be ridden, and you can still have loads of fun. Still teach your horse loads of stuff and have some cool party tricks to do out in the field that you enjoy doing, and definitely that's a process that people can follow. For sure.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Part 2 will be with us next week, so make sure you hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you there.